This is a project that I started on trying to come up with a cheap blank for the Taylor 5650 Spencer rifle. Brass blanks have always been very expensive. I bought some friends of mine have bought some, and at $1, $1.50 a piece, they just don't work out good. So my project was this fall to see if I could make it shoot something cheaper. Well, what I came up with was starting with one of these, which is a 32 gauge shotgun shell, and by cutting them and running them through a die and loading them and crimping them, you come up with an end result, which is a very inexpensive 5650 blank, which cost about 22 cents loaded, so not too bad. So here's what I got. Here's what I need. First thing you need is a shell holder. I use an RCBS number 31. I think it's for the 5090. It also works, but it works pretty good on these two. So you need a shell holder. You need a set of dies, Lyman dies, 5650, made for the Taylor. They're available at Midway USA, and I think Buffalo Arms also carries them. So you need that. Another die that you need is the crimp die that makes the crimp. C&H Tool and Die Company makes the crimp die. I also have a file trim die from C&H also, that is to cut 8mm label down to proper size. I don't use that other than as a size die. I use it kind of as my final size die to get a kind of slight bottleneck on the casing. So that's all the dies that you need there. The other thing that you need is some way to put on the ram here something flat, because you're going to need to run that shell case all the way up. And if you use the shell holder, it will not size the last hundredths of an inch of that brass, and they won't chamber very good. There's several different things that you can use. Just a flat washer on top of the ram. The problem with that is it'll probably fall off. Or you can use this piece here, and what this is, it's from a RCBS swage die set, and it just sits over the ram. Works perfect for that. Or the other thing that I use is this flat piece that was from a Lyman ram prime die, which is this one here. I happen to have it round. It snaps right in perfectly, won't fall off. But you can rig up whatever you want. These two options are very good options that you have. So that's something else that you might need. This device here, a deburring tool, works good because you need to take a little plastic off of the inside of the case mouth after you cut them. There's a little bit in there, a little too much in there, and we'll go through that a little bit later too. So one of those is very helpful. They're about 10 bucks or so. Set of fingernail clippers, big set of fingernail clippers is going to come in handy, and we'll go over that. Foam rope. This is a foam rope. You can buy at Menards in different diameters. This is a 1/2 inch. I also use 5/8 inch. A pair of scissors to cut it. I cut about 1/4 inch plugs is what I'm using, and you can cut it real quick. Not too much of a problem there. So you have that. 3F black powder is what I've been using. I like 35 grains of 3F. I generally use a set of Lyman scoops, and this is 2.2 cc scoop that I'm going to use. A hammer comes in handy. We'll show you what the hammer is for that you got there. And then you can buy these things. These are the 32 gauge shotgun shells by the bag. That bag right there is $13.99. If you buy them by the 1,000, I think they take $1 off. But these already come primed. So you already get your primers for roughly 14.5 cents delivered. You get 100 casings, you get your primers. So it's a pretty good deal. It's not too bad of a deal. The first step that you would take is to cut the shell casing to length. So it starts out as a 2.5 inch, 32 gauge. You can check the website that I've got. It's got where you can get all of this material. But they come at 2.5 inch, and you need to cut them off. And I cut them off to 1.61 inches. Actually, I don't cut them. It turned out to be better that I had a friend that offered to cut them for me. He has a jig set up that he can stick 20 casings in at once, run them over his table saw, and cuts them off to the perfect length. And this is the way they come out. So I'm not going to show you the cutting part. It's pretty easy if you got a friend that can cut them off. First thing you're going to have to do with this case here is to size the brass. The brass part on here is just a little bit too big to go into the Taylor chamber. The downside of the whole project is the plastic is red. You know, it'd be great if they were a copper color, but that's in a perfect world, I guess. So the way I size these, I'll show you. I'm not going to use a shell holder. I will use this Lyman punch from the Lyman flat piece from the priming die there. I want to run it all the way up into the die. The other thing that I have is the Lyman die. I take this is the size die from the Lyman. I unscrew the internal part that will deprime a case. I use a 4-inch long 3/8 inch diameter bolt with a washer on top, and I stick it inside the die. What I'll do is screw that die in. I want to screw it down far enough where when the ram is raised up, it will contact the bottom of the die. And that's about perfect the way I would want it. Now, in a perfect world, I guess, a person would deprime all these, take the live primers out. You can do that. If you got a loader, you can punch it all, and I would certainly recommend taking them all out. With that said, I don't do that. And it's safe to do as long as you remember to lower the ram back down. If you leave the ram up, the primer will go off. So you just simply take the casing, set it on top, guide it in, and then run it all the way up to where this is touching the bottom of the die. Bring it down. Now you got to get the case out of there. Here comes the tricky part. You always need to make sure the ram goes down. The ram goes back down. Here comes the hammer part. It may look a little scary, but it's not really. You can, a couple hits with it. The casing will come down. Ideally, what you have is your hand there to catch it. You can run up another one, hand down. They tap out fairly easily, and you have them sized. If you're going to load 500, you could set it up, have it load all 500, size all 500 of them, no problem. So you can go through that. However, my next step that I'm going to do is use this little torpedo thing, as I call it, the deburring tool, and I'm going to take a little bit off of here. I usually go 1, maybe 2 swipes, and that's about enough. I've got a wastebasket down here that I generally hold over. So you got 1, 2 swipes, and that's all you need that for. It's kind of important because that way it enables it to crimp a little bit easier. Next step, you'll take that off, put it down, take this die out. We're done with this die. We get the shell holder, put the shell holder on, RCBS number 31. If the casings were not primed, you would then go ahead and prime them. Like I say, mine are already primed, so I just leave them that way. 3F. I use 3F GoX, what I got right here. Pour a little bit in my cup. With 2.2 cc's, which is 35 grains, I simply pour it in the casing. Take one of the wads. If you use a 5/8 wads, they fit pretty tight. And you want them to fit tight because you don't want any powder leaking out of these. Another 35 grains. I usually kind of poke them in with my little finger. Those of you people that have bigger fingers than I do, you might want to use a shell case. 30-06 shell case works great for that. You can just simply poke it in there. It should fit flat right on top of the powder. So you got both of these fitting right on top of the powder. Take the crimp die from C&H. Screw it in the die. You don't want to screw it all the way down because you're going to need to adjust it. So I put the case in. I'll run the case up, and by feel you kind of get it, and it's starting to crimp a little bit. You can kind of see that. It's not crimped enough, so I'll screw it down a little bit more and try to get it where I pretty much have about 2/3 of the way closed. So we got that one crimped. Every so often you will get a case that doesn't crimp perfectly, and the first one did not crimp perfectly. It has a little fold on the side here. It's not a big deal. This one did crimp pretty good, you know, what I would call perfectly in there. Next step comes in the fingernail clippers, and what I do is I clip off the points, these points that are here at about a 45-degree angle, and that takes off any points that, before I would clip these off, the points would hit on the top part of the chamber. And ideally that's what it looks like. That's what the perfect round is going to look like. But then the fingers on here, the crimp has a tendency to open up a little bit. So I kind of got the idea, what if I fold it down a little bit more? So the first step that I do, which you probably can't see, is the edge of my reloading bench here. I just simply smash the casing and work it in there, work it back and forth, and smash that sucker flat. So they kind of look like that, smashed flat. Next thing I do is take out the crimp die, and I will take from the Lyman die the expander die. Actually, it's all I wanted to do is smash it a little flatter. So I take the expander die, which has a flat expander on there, screw it in, and again, it's kind of a process of feel. You run the casing up in there, and you can kind of feel the die contacting that, and you can just simply screw it down where you get the right amount of flatness that you want. And that's about where I like it. Let me do this one here too. So I end up with two casings that are flat. Now, the first time that I did this, when I went to chamber them, since I flattened them, it flared it out a little bit. And they still fed, but I had to work the lever a little bit harder. So to solve that problem, I take this die out. And this is the cutoff die, the CNH file trim die that they refer to. It's to make 8mm, actually it was for 8mm Kropatsch. It cut those off to the right length and stuff, but it bottlenecks the casing. So I screw that in, and I screw it all the way down until it contacts the shell holder. I want it all the way down, and there it is. I simply take the casing, put it in, run it all the way up, puts a slight little bottleneck on it, and that's the finished round. That's what it looks like. That right there is the perfect finished round, is what they look like. You got a nice little bottleneck in there. They will feed as fast as you want to feed them, or they'll feed as slow as you want to feed them, working the action. But even ones like this that didn't turn out perfect, it's got that little fold in there, not to really worry. They'll still feed perfectly, at least all the ones that I've used have. But ideally they come looking out just like this, 35 grains of 3F, and they fire fantastic. And I go through some shooting that we'll show you here in a little bit, where I would load the Spencer up. I think I went through 7 tubes, 49 rounds, pretty quick, no problems whatsoever with the gun, and they function great. Like I say, the only downside of it is they're red. So it's kind of bad, but hey, they're red. The Spencer has an internal magazine. You can't see them. They show up good that you can pick them up if you want to. That's another advantage. If you want to pick them up and reload them, all you got to do is knock the primer out and you will be able to reload them. I don't have any fired ones on top of my table here, but I do have some, and all you got to do is prime them, put powder in, smash the top back down, run them up into the die, and they work great. So you can either blow them and leave them at 22 cents a piece, not a bad price.